Well, greetings. You know, the life of Abraham is absolutely rich in revelation, prophetic revelation. It's a great story, but it just has so much more in it than just a review of a historic incident. Today, I'd like for us to take a look at what's called the test in the life of Abraham, found in Genesis chapter 22. Let me get the story before us and then we'll go into it. Sometime later, God tested Abraham. He said to him, "Abram, here I am," he replied. Then God said, "Take your son, your only son Isaac, whom you love, and go to the region of Moriah. Sacrifice him there as a burnt offering on one of the mountains I will tell you about." Early the next morning, Abraham got up and saddled a donkey. He took with him two of his servants and his son Isaac. When he had cut enough wood for the burnt offering, he set out for the place God had told him about. On the third day, Abraham looked up and saw the place in a distance. He said to his servant, "Stay here with the donkey while I and the boy go over there. We will worship and then we will come back to you." Abraham took the wood for the burnt offering and placed it on his son Isaac, and he himself carried the fire and the knife. As the two of them went on together, Isaac spoke up and said to his father, "Abraham, father." "Yes, my son," Abraham replied. "The fire and the wood are here," Isaac said, "but where's the lamb for the burnt offering?" Abraham answered, "God himself will provide the lamb for the burnt offering, my son." And the two of them went on together. When they reached the place God had told him about, Abraham built an altar. There he arranged the wood on it. He bound his son Isaac and laid him on the altar on top of the wood. Then he reached out his hand and took the knife to slay his son. But the angel of the Lord called to him from heaven, "Abraham, Abraham, here I am," he replied. "Do not lay a hand on the boy," he said. "Do not do anything to him. Now I know that you fear God, because you have not withheld from me your son, your only son." Abraham looked up, and there in the thicket he saw a ram caught by its horns. He went over and took the ram and sacrificed it as a burnt offering instead of his son. So Abraham called the place, "The Lord will provide." And to this day it is said, "On the mountain of the Lord it will be provided." The angel of the Lord called to Abraham from heaven a second time and said, I swear by myself, declares the Lord, that because you have done this and have not withheld your son, your only son, I will surely bless you and make your descendants as numerous as the stars in the sky and as the sands of the seashore. Your descendants will take possession of the cities of their enemies, and through your offspring all nations on the earth will be blessed, because you have obeyed me. Then Abraham returned to his servants, and they set off together for Beersheba, and Abraham stayed in Beersheba. Well, there you have the story. Wow, what a story. It's big. It's one of the biggest sections in the Bible, actually. Now, I want to just drop this in perspective. So let's look at a couple of other incidents. In Genesis chapter 9, we read the story of how Noah built an altar and made a sacrifice for a burnt offering. That's Genesis 9:6. And then over in Exodus chapter 24, verse 7, we read about how Moses built an altar on Mount Sinai for a burnt offering. Now, in the middle, in between these two specific events, we now have Abraham building an altar for a burnt sacrifice. Well, this is kind of interesting, especially in light of what all is going on. You see, we know the story, but I want to make sure that we see the big picture in all of this. And here's the way it works. In each of these instances, the building of an altar for a burnt sacrifice follows the account of how God had brought about a specific salvation. Well, What kind of a salvation? Well, in Genesis 9, God had rescued Noah and his family from a global flood. In Exodus 24, God has delivered the Israelites from the bondage in Egypt. So now here in the middle, we have a picture that has revelation in it of how God had rescued Abraham from defilement, deceit, and defrauding. He has rescued him to use him as a father of a nation, of a people, a covenant community. And so in each case, the author of these books highlights the covenant with God that results in blessing, global blessing, actually. It's more than just blessing the individuals in the story. So here's what I want us to see. It is through covenants that God is at work restoring fellowship with himself. He's bringing man back to himself in a redemptive effort that is the story of the Bible. And God's central desire is to bless not just a person or a family of a person, but to bless all peoples of the earth. And we see this over and over again. Genesis 1, Exodus 24, Genesis 12. So we know, you and I, we know the rest of the story. And we know that the ultimate sacrifice by which God will achieve this will be on this same mountain. And there will be similar individuals, Father and Son, and so on. The mountain is called, the place is called Mount Moriah, or the region of Moriah, and accordingly we have a Mount Moriah specifically. It is also called Yahweh Yireh, or Jehovah, and we say Jireh, but it's Yireh. And this is the heart of it. So Abraham called that place, the Lord will provide. And to this day it is said, on the mountain of the Lord it will be provided. So there you have both of them, Moriah and Jehovah Yireh. Now, there's an artist that has done a little diagram for us that gives us a glimpse of the 5 offerings mentioned in the book of Leviticus. And there are 3 of them that are voluntary: the burnt offering, the meal offering, and the peace offering. And then there are 2 that are for judgment and atonement, and that's the sin offering and the trespass offering. And so if you read the New Testament, for instance, a look at the effect of the burnt offering is in John's Gospel. The peace offering is in Luke's Gospel. The sin offering is in Mark's Gospel. And the trespass offering is Matthew's Gospel. So we have the 4 Gospels giving us a look at all of these things. Now, all of them are mentioned in the Psalms and various other places in the Bible as well, and they all have revelation, symbolism, and significance. There are some interesting details now that I want to lift out of this story. For instance, God commands Abraham to do 3 simple things. The command is direct, and there are each imperatives. It is simply take, and the verbs are go, and then sacrifice him. So the author seems to deliberately describe some incidentals that they're fun, but they don't seem to have anything important to contribute to the heart of the story. And so he gives us these details, that Abraham saddled his donkey. Okay, well, so he could have walked or he could have ridden the donkey or whatever, but he saddled his donkey. He took with him 2 of his servants. Well, they don't really seem to have much to do with what's going to happen. And then it says, when he had cut enough wood. So he went about the business of cutting wood. Now, the pieces are big enough to need to split wood, but it's going to take a lot of wood to do a burnt offering. So this is going to be a pile of wood, and ultimately it's all going to be loaded on Isaac, and he's going to be the one that carries it up the mountain, the last portion of the mountain. Another thing that we see in the story is how Abraham's faith just shines through here. And you can imagine the uncertainty, the questions in his head and his heart as he goes about the business of saddling his donkey and rounding up his servants and then splitting wood and all of that. As they trudge off for 3 days, you can imagine the thinking, God, I don't understand what you have in mind, but I've learned to trust you, all those kind of things. So Isaac asks the question, where's the lamb for the burnt offering? And it's interesting how Abraham answers in absolute faith, though he doesn't have a clue what's going to happen. He says, God himself will provide the lamb for the burnt offering. Well, there you have it. Okay. Now, there's a prophetic picture in all of this, and so let's look at some of the detail. You know that Jesus, the Messiah, is also a son of promise, like Isaac was. And the detail begins to be fulfilled here. And both Jesus and Isaac go to Mount Moriah, the region of Moriah, specifically Mount Moriah, and is outside the city. In the New Testament, it's outside the city of Jerusalem, but the same city, smaller, is Salem. Melchizedek was its king, and there was a little town a little lower on the hill. Father and son trudge up the mountain together. And we know that the Father and the Son go to Mount Calvary together. It's interesting that the Son carries the wood. Jesus carried his cross out of the city and up to the mountain where he was sacrificed. And God himself provided a sacrifice, his only Son, the Son he loved. And in the New Testament, when John the Baptist baptizes Jesus, there's a voice that says, "This is my beloved Son." And then we know from John 3:16 that it is God's only begotten Son, his one and only Son. So these phrases in Scripture are repeated, and any Jew would have known exactly what they meant. Also, God himself provided a sacrifice, and this put the issue to rest for all time about human sacrifice. Now, we read in other cultures, great cultures of the past, the Mayas, the Incas, many others, it is thought that they did human sacrificing. Now, there are some other theories, but it's thought that they might have done that, and we know that historically it has happened. Here's the passage. The angel of the Lord called to Abraham from heaven. Now, this apparently is after the sacrifice, but it says a second time, and said, I swear by myself. And in Hebrews, the writer of the Hebrews talks about how God swears, and there's no one greater than himself, so he swears by himself. I swear by myself, declares the Lord, that because you've done this. Now, it's not that he earned it, it's that he passed the test. Because you have done this and have not withheld your son, I will surely bless you and make your descendants as numerous as the stars of the sand of the seashore. Your descendants will take possession of the cities of their enemies, and through your offspring all nations on the earth will be blessed, because you have obeyed me. So obedience to God, the trust in God, is key. It doesn't earn, it evidences. And the angel speaks, the messenger of God speaks. And this is the second time, incidentally. So I want to highlight this. Because you have done this, it has to do with effort, but it doesn't have to do with earning. And so it evidences his absolute trust in God and allows God to make a picture, to do a prophecy through the event that is absolutely beautiful and amazing in its details. Ultimately, of course, God is involved in the process of blessing all nations on earth. The Jews in recent years, the scholars have awakened to this, that the words translated all nations, goyim, are actually speaking about the Gentiles. And they have awakened to the fact that God wants to bless Gentiles all over the world. It's a fascinating concept and beautiful in all of this. And I just lost my PowerPoint here, so just give me a second and I'll see if I can bring it back and see if I can get it up. Somehow in here it's possible to get all these things up, and now I have to run down to another. Hang on just a second with me here. I'll get this. I think I can do this. So the second time, and we have all of that up here. So, that was the last slide I had in here. I thought I had a couple of others. There's some beautiful details in all of this. Let me go back and see if I can pick it all up. When he had cut enough wood, imagine the amount of wood. Imagine the heaviness of the load as Isaac walks up the mountain with all of this wood. Likewise, as Jesus carries the cross, it's a heavy load of wood that he trudges up the mountain with as he moves to Golgotha. And the confidence that Abraham, when he says, that Abraham evidenced when he says to his servants, "We will come back to you." So in Hebrews, there's this reference to the fact that Abraham had a hope in a kind of resurrection. He had no idea how it was going to happen, but he did know that God had promised that he was going to multiply his descendancy through this promised son. So if you're going to kill him, what does God have in mind? It must be some kind of a resurrection. And so in absolute trust to this awesome God, Abraham fully obeys the instructions. Well, there's a lot more in this, but isn't it a beautiful picture that is perfectly fulfilled in detail in the atoning work of Jesus Christ on Mount Calvary, and specifically on the Passover? Another picture, and God put all of these pictures of Revelation together and in detail allowed them to be fulfilled through the atoning work of Jesus Christ. What a concept. Thanks for joining me today, and may God richly, richly bless you.